Let's talk about what happens beyond the manual. Hello, welcome back to Beyond the Manual. Today, we're going to talk about file shares. File shares are an ancillary part to your documentation strategy. So if you're a launching brand or an emerging brand and you only have essentially your operations manual, you probably have some forms and some additional materials that franchisees will need to have that aren't included in the ops manual. If you're a restaurant, for example, your recipes and your build guides probably live somewhere else because their change frequency is higher than the ops manual. So regardless, you need a file share system. It doesn't matter how big you are. The bigger you are, the more difficult this can be. But for now, today, what we're going to talk about is the good and the bad of the most popular file shares. We're going to talk about the keys to success to make sure that it works for you and not against you, and that you don't regret your decision. And then we'll talk about the basics of how to choose one. I'm not going to give a recommendation, so if that's what you're looking for, you can stop now. But I will talk through the good and the bad of some of these platforms, for lack of a better term. So, what are the options? We've heard of Google Drive and Dropbox and SharePoint/OneDrive. Those are really the three big ones. There's also a Box program. There are some others out there, but those are the three big ones that everyone seems to use. So the good of each of them. Google Drive is inexpensive. It does a good job of role-based monitoring, which means that a franchisee can come in and see financial information, and his manager can come in and see just the operational things. And you could even give access, if you wanted, to line level employees to come in and get a checklist. So really good from that standpoint. SharePoint is similar. You have the ability to break it down by folders and by document as to who has access to it. You can send, just like on Google Drive, you can send the link and somebody can come and find it. Dropbox is, again, the same. So all of them, from the role-based authorization, authentication aspect, do a pretty good job of it, as you might expect. The way that they do authentication and authorization, who's allowed to come in and are you who you say you are, varies a little bit. Folks who use Gmail as their franchisees' email addresses and to manage all of that tend to use Google Drive. Those who use Microsoft, whether it be an Exchange server or some other adaptation of that, that's what they use, and that they tend to use SharePoint more because they're already bundled together. So authorization, authentication happens much more easily when you're doing that. When you go to a Dropbox, then you have a couple of choices. You can either share just by document, which can be a little bit of an administrative nightmare, or you can set up groups and manually enter all of the people who are allowed to come in. And then you can also do single sign-on, and you can do single sign-on for some of the others as well. But those are slight differences. One thing to note, that if you're doing Dropbox and somebody has a personal Dropbox, there can be a conflict with that. Sometimes they'll complain that they can't find what they're looking for, and that's because they've logged in using the wrong email address, or they haven't switched their account. Where you see that a little bit more is when they say, I've already uploaded that. Usually what has happened is that they've already uploaded it to their own personal one and not to you. So know that with Dropbox, and it can be kind of a hassle, but once you get it straightened out, then you know. Those are mainly the goods. Here are some of the bads. Google Drive, for whatever reason, is not easy to search. You'd think that it would be, coming from Google, the king of search, or at least they used to be. Search there is horrible, and it's very difficult to find things. My main complaint with Google Drive is when you go to move folders or files around, it typically has to be done one at a time. and you right click and you say move this, and then you tell it where to move, and that moves one. Great, unless you're moving 150 docs. And that really is very often the case. It's a known use case, and it's a pain. It's moving one brick at a time. So know that about G Drive. SharePoint enables you to move all of that stuff about, but good luck finding anything. Most people really dislike SharePoint. It is what is considered to be the corporate version of file shares, and it works in a corporate way. A lot of times, if you're using SharePoint, you have to change your own processes to match the platform instead of the other way around. It's not really as configurable. Some people swear by it. So, your mileage may vary, but it's not the most user-friendly, especially when that's not your job. When your job is to support franchises, figuring out the intricacies of those can be a pain. There is one more version of a file share that I see people using quite a bit. It's enough for me to mention it. And that is, I've already got this other platform that does this other thing. Let's say that I've got a learning management system that also allows me to upload documents. So the learning management system houses our courses and our lessons, and then I can also add logos or add a form or whatever. Fine. Another example of that is FranConnect. A lot of people use that for franchise relationship management, tracking versions of their franchise agreement and store information. FranConnect decided at one point that they were going to allow people to upload their own documents because their customers were asking for it. Know that FranConnect does what it does very well. Most LMSs do what they do very well. What they don't do very well is file storage. It can help. You've already paid for it. The functionality is technically there. Just know that it's a little bit like using a knife as a can opener. It'll do it, but it's harder. It's got more risk, and it's really just not all that good. So those are our main ones. One other point, and I wrote this down and I forgot to mention it earlier. SharePoint and OneDrive are the same thing. So if you're using Microsoft products and you think, well, I'm just going to use OneDrive, that's where it always asks me to save my document when I'm done. Know that OneDrive, one person. SharePoint, share docs. You can do both. You can use OneDrive to share documents, but it's tethered to the person who has created the account. If that person leaves, if that person changes some things, then the documents are no longer shared. People no longer have access to it. So don't fall into the trap of using OneDrive because that's what Microsoft recommends you save docs to right off the bat. Use SharePoint if you're using Microsoft type of stuff. Okay. So what are the keys to success to a file share? Let's start with the problems. What we see when we come into a mature brand or a brand that's been around for a while, been creating content, is that there's chaos everywhere. People can't find things is the biggest one. But when you get in there, then you find out that there's duplicated content. Your marketing vendors are found in both the marketing folder and the construction folder because they were used at grand opening. Maybe you've got a grand opening folder. The chaos is created by the platform itself. And that chaos exists in two places. First, your users say, where can I find this? And one finds it in the marketing folder, one finds it in the construction folder. Those may be different, and the documents that they find slightly different. And the reason that they are is because back at the creation phase, your team said, you know what, we need a checklist for grand opening. Well, I couldn't find one, so I made one, and then I stored it here. So they stored it in a different place. Now you've got duplicate content. When something changes, did you change it in both places? Users don't know which is authoritative. So a file share is, the best analogy is that it's like a garage or like an attic. And the problem is that everybody puts things into it and nobody is responsible for pulling anything out. So you can mitigate that chaos. You can get on top of it a little bit. And frankly, you need a librarian. We've talked about this in lots of other places. So if you don't know what a librarian is or how much I advocate for one, go watch some of those others. The solution to your technical challenge is analog. So that means governance. Who is allowed to add something? Who is allowed to change something? Who determines where it goes? Who determines what the file name is and whether or not it has metadata to make it more easily accessible for users? All of those things, you've got to have that structure in place before you ever allow people to put things up. The next is information architecture. How do we group like items with like items? Marketing is a pretty good example of that. Grand opening marketing. Does that go under marketing? Does it go under construction? Is there a grand opening folder? So how you architect your information, be it sequentially based on what franchisees need to do and when, whether it's topic based, whether you've got categories, however that happens, you need to be consistent with it. And you need to make sure that anybody who's authorized to add stuff to it does it in the right way, that they are trained on what your architecture is. That goes into taxonomy. My favorite example of this is my mother-in-law asked my wife to go find her divorce papers. She was getting a loan and she needed her divorce decree. So my wife goes and looks in the file cabinet and comes back and tells her mother-in-law it doesn't exist. I can't find it anywhere. And her mom said, look under T. T for what? T for termination of marriage. Okay. I probably would have looked under divorce, but that's the difference in taxonomy. A cultural agreement as to what we're going to call things, whether it's taxonomy or nomenclature or glossary of terms, is important so that everybody knows what the other is talking about. And you'd be surprised to find how many differences there are in the way people within the same organization talk about the same things. Next, said it before, you need a librarian, somebody who knows where everything is, what it should be named, how it links to other places, and what its importance is. And then that leads to the last thing, which is archive, archive, archive. Everything goes in, whose job is it to pull it out? And a librarian will make sure that this is old, this is duplicate, this lives in 3 different places, we should combine them into one. The librarian will help make sure that only active and current documents are in, and that when you pull something out, it either gets sunsetted, deleted, or it gets archived for legal purposes. Your librarian will know those rules, and it'll help keep it clean so that you don't fall into the worst possible chaos of file share, which is I can't find anything. So how do you choose which file share is best for you? And there are a couple of answers to that. One is none of them are best for you. And another one is any one of them will probably do. So this is somewhat low stakes. Most people choose based on who is their email provider. People who distribute email addresses via Gmail use Google Drive. People that have Microsoft Exchange usually use SharePoint. And oftentimes it's as simple as that. There's another choice though, and that would be best in class. And we, for example, we use Gmail for our email addresses, and then Dropbox manages our documentation, and then Microsoft Word is our choice for creating some tools, but we use the Microsoft Suite for some of those tools. We really use a content management system for most of that. But the point is that we use the tool that has been designed for its purpose, and then we patch them all together, whether that's through single sign-on or by linking from one to another. So we'll often use many of them, and that's our choice. And it's because we need very specialized software to create, and because we need the segmentation and the granularization that a Dropbox provides for us. Which one you choose isn't as important as to how well you manage it. And having a librarian to archive, to govern the input, to make sure things are findable, those are the really important things. Budget may also be a concern, and from that standpoint, SharePoint is often included when you've got Microsoft 365. Google Drive is included when you start sending out Gmail accounts. So whatever you decide, know that there are pros and cons to it. I tell you that not only so that you know what to expect, but also so that you don't do a whole lot of the grass is greener on the other side. Once you're entrenched, it can be difficult to switch, and to go from G Drive to SharePoint is next to impossible. It's easier to go to a Dropbox, but you don't have to worry about the choice you made being detrimental to your business, because all of them have their drawbacks. They all have their advantages, but each one has their drawbacks. So don't get too caught up in that. Choose the one that fits your budget, the one that your librarian feels comfortable using, and whichever one you feel like your users will be able to find the information that they need. And that's it. File shares are a part of every franchise system. They are a critical part to the solution to distributing information, but they're also a giant agent of chaos. So if you leave today only knowing one thing, it's that you've got to have someone in charge of it to govern it, to make sure that there are rules about what goes in and when things come out. If you do that, you'll mitigate the chaos, and then you can just kind of put that off to the side and not worry that your file share is going to get in the way of you supporting your franchisees. Beyond the Manual is a Manual Makers production. This episode was hosted by Brian Garner, directed by Chase Palacios, produced and edited by Charlotte Blow, commentary by Lucia the Spanish Paella. Visit manualmakers.com for more resources. If you like what we're doing, please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts.